Hey everyone, Tyler here at the Movie Beat. Welcome back to another video review. This one goes out to all the Son Ye-jin fans out there, powerful Son Ye-jin fans. Your voice was heard loud and clear. Thank you for your support on this channel. Today I'm going to be talking about the 2016 drama film, The Last Princess, directed by Hur Jin-ho, who is a very, very successful melodrama director here in Korea. I think a lot of people sort of sleep on this director, especially his name doesn't really have the power of like a Park Chan-wook or somebody like that, but has directed some very, very successful dramas here like Christmas in August, One Fine Spring Day, April Snow, Happiness, and the recent film Forbidden Dream. He's got a pretty large body of work, so when his name is attached to something, I highly recommend, or I do think it's something that's worth looking into for sure. So I'm going to keep the plot synopsis extra brief for this one because I think there might be a lot more interesting things to get to, and I do want to say that this review does feature some extended commentary, in my opinion, that might not be so important for all viewers, but I just want to make that point up front, and that it's something that I find rather interesting, so I decided to include it. So thanks for your understanding. Let's get into it. The Last Princess is the film about the life of Princess 덕hae, who, because of Imperial Japan's occupation of Joseon, the former name of Korea, was more or less forced to live the majority of her adult life in Japan. This was done for a number of different reasons, but in essence it seems to have been done for Imperial Japan to slowly but surely control and dismantle the Joseon monarchy in order to gain absolute dominance over the people. This becomes not only an affront to the honor and legacy of the royal family, but it's also a huge blow to the national pride of Joseon that takes a toll on the psychological well-being of the Joseon people that ends up rippling through generations. Alright, so I want to begin with some of the good things about The Last Princess. One of the great things about watching any kind of historical drama set during the Joseon Dynasty area is a lot of the beautiful visuals that you get to take in, and this is largely because any type of story set during this time is most certainly about or around the royal family or elites or other aristocrats, so you get to see them living in ornately decorated palaces, wearing brightly covered robes in rich reds, yellows, purples, and pinks, lavished in fine jewelry and other accessories, surrounded by finely crafted furniture. And some of these palaces you can actually still visit today. I've been to some, they're incredible to go to. So when you get to also see them in these films, it's like a bonus. It's just like, wow, you know, that place is real. And we do get some of this visual splendor in the beginning of The Last Princess during 덕hae's early years living in the palace, but unfortunately, and perhaps very suited for the story of The Last Princess, the colors in the film get very muted and monochrome as her life really deteriorates as she lives abroad in Japan. There's also some excellent makeup work in The Last Princess as the story spans many years. Both actors Park Hae-il and Son Ye-jin really transform rather seamlessly into their older counterparts, as the story also very smoothly weaves back and forth between timelines. I did feel like it was done better through Park Hae-il's perspective towards the beginning of the film. Some of that seamless transition does die down a little bit later, but still it doesn't take away from the excellent makeup work. It was just really stunning. There's also this very heavy sadness that you can feel throughout the entire picture, which I think is very reflective of the national Korean psyche as a whole, in the hurt that is still felt due to what they experienced collectively under the occupation of Japan. As a foreigner, it's something that I can appreciate, but I may not ever be able to fully understand the extent of that pain. Son Ye-jin also, rather uncharacteristically, looks the part of a sad, broken, lonely woman who lives a sort of tormented life against her wishes, when her only crime was that she was born a princess. There's really only one or two scenes in this film where you're gonna see Son Ye-jin smiling happily. So this is definitely not your happily ever after Disney princess story, but it does interestingly feature a lot of similar princess-style tropes or characters that do make for a kind of classic princess story experience. We've got the Good Kingdom, our princess who's been swept away against her wishes to a faraway land, her knight in shining armor or her Prince Charming, the evil stepfather type, arranged marriages, and even a kind of fairy godmother. So it's all kind of here, and I find it very interesting being mostly a true story, just how similar it is to a lot of more fantasy or fairy tale type princess stories. So I think that element of the movie adds to its watchability because, like I said earlier, it is a very sad, depressing movie that those characteristics make it, a rather enjoyable watch. I also very much like the contrast between the virtues and vices of human nature present in this movie. There's this constant back and forth between characters who are either wholly selfish or selfless, whether it's the resistance fighters ready to sacrifice their lives for their country, or Princess Dak-hae volunteering to teach children the Korean language, or give inspiration to an oppressed working class, even sticking up for her country's cuisine. These virtues are at full-on war with the villain of the film, Han Taek-soo, played by Yoon Jae-moon. He's this pro-Japanese, motivated by greed and power, really willing to sell out his country and his countrymen for anything. This conflict is the driving force for a lot of the pain and drama that the characters experience in the movie, and I think it was one of the more interesting aspects of the film overall. Now, the problem I have with films like The Last Princess is they kind of tend to simplify the complexities of the actual historical events and only end up showing this narrow band of what actually happened. So the movie sort of ends up feeling like this national rallying cry or something to sort of lasso public perception to get them in line with some current or modern political talking points. And the reason that this kind of bothers me is that maybe some of you know that I've taught, I'm a teacher in Korea, and some of these movies are also kind of presented in an educational way. So I'd see some really young students with very, very, very angry anti-Japanese attitudes, and it was like, okay, I can understand that, but I feel like in the films it's not being like a World War II movie where you see the Nazis, and it's very distinct that these are not the Germans that we know today. This was an old Germany, and things have changed, and you don't really get that sense, at least for me when I watch some of these historical dramas in Korea, that the current Japan and the old Japan, they don't really make a very good distinction, and I think it does affect the youth and the public perception in some ways. So that's just a personal experience thing for me, and one of the things that kind of turns me off to movies like this. However, The Last Princess, compared to most, does a really good job at not demonizing or cartoonishly portraying the Japanese so much in the movie. So I do commend it for that, and I also really liked that at the beginning of the film they announce on a title card that there are historical inaccuracies or things will not necessarily always add up historically speaking. They don't always do that. They mostly just say this is based on a true story. And apparently one of the things that was invented was the character Jang Han in the movie, which is kind of the knight in shining armor, the Prince Charming. So I do like that is set up front. One other thing about this movie that is a little bit negative for me is it creates a lot of confusion about the royal family relationships, and it sort of brushes over just how everyone is connected. It does announce who they are, but it doesn't actually say where they are in the hierarchy. It's just be like, oh, this is another prince, this is a princess, this is a crown prince. It creates a bit of confusion, but it also, for me, kind of ended up romanticizing the whole monarchy structure in a way that doesn't really square with a lot of modern progressive thoughts on equality and things like that. So, for example, Princess Dak-hae's father, King Gojong, he has his official wife who is the queen, but he also has like 13 or more these consorts, or like his girlfriends, his second wives, third, fourth, fifth, sixth. He's got a lot of children. And he has a lot of children throughout his entire life. So we've got multiple characters who are given prince titles, and it becomes a bit confusing. And I don't think that they would ever actually explain the relationships too clearly to audiences, because I think it could make people think, like, what are we rooting for the survival of? This is kind of weird. For instance, there's a character named Yi-woo, played by Go-soo in the film, who's also a member of the royal family and calls Princess Dak-hae auntie in the film. And it was a little bit weird at first, because you're like, okay, he's the prince, doesn't that mean like he's the brother? But he is the second son of another one of the king's sons. There's also another crown prince who would be Princess Ddhkhe's half-brother, who's much older, and he's established in the Imperial Japanese Army, who has his own child who is like of high status. It gets pretty crazy in just the complexities of the royal bloodline. Luckily, there's only one princess though, Princess Ddhkhe. So that, to me, the confusing aspect of just how exactly everyone is related was a little bit of a distraction for me in this film. The film also mentions some resistance fighters in Manchuria very casually, and I think that could be somewhat confusing to people that aren't familiar necessarily with the history. But yeah, there was this resistance movement that was very anti-Japanese occupation, and they would probably be considered terrorists by the Japanese Imperial Army. If you do want to see more about what these whole resistance fighters thing is, there's a really entertaining blockbuster film called Assassination, or Amsal, that I would highly recommend checking out. And finally, there was just a few production value issues for me. Some of the indoor scenes or night scenes in Japanese territory did sort of feel like it was kind of haphazardly put together on a Universal backlot. Kind of got that vibe. Some of the explosions, it didn't have the hugest budget, but really good costumes and makeup, like I said. So it kind of balances out on the production value side. As a whole, this is a pretty good drama film, if not overly sad one. It does have a really good payoff in the end. So I'm going to rate The Last Princess a strong 6.5 out of 10. Let me know what you guys thought of it, and maybe what you liked or didn't like about the film in the comments below. Until next time, thanks again for watching. I'm Tyler at The Movie Beat. Keep watching movies.